everybody, Miss Peachy again from your WCA biology class, and Unit 5, Lesson 14 here. The map is not the territory. That is the title of this lesson. So basically, this lesson kind of delves into what a model is in science and how a model kind of isn't a complete picture of everything that's happening all across the board. Just as a reminder, oops, that isn't what I wanted to drag over here. All right, this one is what I want to drag over here. Just as a reminder, you do have this notes sheet you can get from our website. It's just going to give you kind of an outline of what we're talking about today, and you can have it up while we're going through the lesson and kind of jot some stuff down on the side. So basically, when we begin here, it really only gives you one vocab word to start with, but we have a few more that I'm going to introduce. Talks a little bit about George Washington and how, people have probably heard the story of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, and, then he realized he couldn't tell a lie and blah, 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 and kind of using that as an example of how not everything is exactly kind of how it is. That didn't probably actually happen, but it's more of a model to describe how you should be honest, right? And so when we look at some of the pictures we have here in biology of mitosis and cell division, we oftentimes look at models. And models are symbolic representations of the thing it describes. However, models can be incomplete. They oftentimes don't give us the whole picture. They're intended to kind of give us a more simplified version of the picture so it's more easily understood, right? And so we've got 3 different models that are represented here on mitosis and the cell cycle. Each one is focusing kind of on a different aspect of it. This one is much more of a broad overview, much more simplified. This one gives us more detail, but it doesn't give us all the details, right? And this one is kind of just giving us an overview of the whole cell cycle and how mitosis fits into the cell cycle. So again, none of them are actually giving us the entire complete picture. Even if you put all 3 of them together, it's not giving us the complete picture, but each one's kind of focusing on a different part of it in order to be able to have us have a better understanding of what's going on. But again, it can leave out information. So a model has limitations, and that's kind of the first part of this lesson. Then as we move through kind of some of the other stuff in this lesson, we get to this second portion called the map is not the territory, modeling and reality in mitosis. And again, it discusses how maps or models have limitations, basically circumstances that control or reduce or may highlight parts of mitosis. So it's either giving you just a little part of it or giving you kind of an overview of it, or maybe just highlighting kind of one aspect of it, but it doesn't give us the whole picture. And in some cases, it's not a completely correct picture either, because mitosis is showing how a diploid organism, and if I can remind you, diploid means that there are 2 copies of each chromosome, but not all cells are diploid and not all organisms have diploid cells. So that's kind of where some incompleteness comes with the model of mitosis. Some organisms are, in fact, polyploid. Write that one down here. So polyploid organisms contain more than 2 sets of chromosomes. In fact, there are actually some organisms that are triploid, meaning they contain 3 sets, or tetraploid, meaning they contain 4 sets, and so on and so forth. And obviously, then our model of mitosis wouldn't really fit well with these types of organisms, depending on the type of organism we're talking about, right? We're focusing on simplifying what cell division actually is and looking at diploid organisms, but the picture might be slightly different when we're looking at triploid, tetraploid or whatever, other types of polyploid organisms. It goes on to talk about something called gene redundancy. So polyploid organisms oftentimes occur in plants. In fact, most polyploid organisms are plants. And the reason why they're polyploid is because of, or to give them gene redundancy. Essentially, they have multiple genes that perform exactly the same function. And this is actually an evolutionary advantage to these organisms because through mutations, the genome oftentimes will get changed over generations. And if you multiply that from generation to generation, over time you get lots of change. That can happen. Some of these mutations are helpful, but oftentimes these mutations are harmful. And so what polyploidy or polyploid organisms have as an advantage is they have backup genes, essentially. These gives them kind of an insurance policy in case something goes wrong. In case one of their essential genes for function becomes mutated, they will have another gene that can perform that same function, and so they're still successfully able to kind of live, reproduce, grow, and kind of do the things that they need to do. Polyploidy is more common in plants than any other types of organisms. It can occur in certain types of animals. Generally, that is something that is induced or something that is bred into the organism by people who are trying to make a polyploid organism. If you look at polyploid cells, they tend to have larger nuclei because they have more genes. They have more chromosomes, so they have to have larger nuclei to be able to accommodate the number of chromosomes. In fact, polyploidy in humans is oftentimes lethal. Polyploidy, especially, they kind of especially talk about triploidy or triploid chromosomes will oftentimes in an embryo lead to termination. So the majority of triploid chromosomes that occur in embryonic development eventually ends up in being a lethal kind of mutation that ends up with that not coming to term, coming to a miscarriage instead. So another place it can occur is in cancer cells. Polyploidal cancer cells are oftentimes believed to metastasize, which means that they can spread to different parts of the body more quickly. So in animals, these are oftentimes negative things if they occur naturally and usually lead to the death of the organism. All right, so that is an overview of what this lesson discussed. So hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next one.